Hi guys, it's Becca from South by Texas State, and today I'm talking to independent writer and investigative journalist Jessica Luther. Jessica has written a book called Unsportsmanlike Conduct, College Football and the Politics of Rape, and she'll also be appearing on a South by Southwest panel called Sports Media's Role in Shaping Social Justice. So Jessica, thank you so much for talking to me today.
Sure.
So first I wanted to ask you if you could tell us a little bit about what brought the idea for this panel and maybe why it's an important discussion to have.
Yeah, there were two different panels that were about this topic, and they sort of merged them together. And so I think the three of us, Sid and Robert and I, all have a specific way that we write about sports, that maybe, we're not beat reporters. I specifically am not at all that kind of a sports reporter. I'm not the person that you ask about someone's retirement or their career, those kind of things. And I think we're seeing like larger trends now in sports media, especially as there's more and more platforms, there's more space. People seem to be responding to this kind of media that looks at not just sports, but the intersection of sports and culture. And so we're going to, I believe, interrogate that intersection.
Sure, that's great. And I think in the panel description a little bit, it talked about how this is kind of a shifting thing in sports media. Like in the past, sports media didn't really talk about social issues at all. Why do you think that that's changing now? Like, where's the opportunity? Is it that fans are interested, or what is that?
Yeah, that's a really great question. I think it's always been there in some way, right? I mean, Sports Illustrated sort of carried that mantle for a long time, but we're seeing stuff now, like I think it was in the last year that the Associated Press said they were going to use a computer to generate game recaps, so there's this way that sort of sports writing has gotten, what's the right word? Computerized, right?
Yeah.
And at the same time, we're seeing that there's a lot more space now for this kind of cultural writing, and people are recognizing the importance of sport in that. There have been people over the last 15 years doing this work, but there has been this sort of explosion, I think, probably coupled with social media, which has just given rise to a whole host of sort of the social justice stuff. And we're seeing that with sports. I think, the Grantland was a big part of that. It was sad when Grantland closed for that reason, even though, that site had its own troubles. But there's so much other space for it. I think, Simmons is going to move on and do that work again in a different space. So, but I definitely think social media and sort of a larger wave of moving towards social justice as a central thing in whatever you're writing about has played a big role.
Yeah, and then on social media, do you think that it's not just social media, but the interactivity opportunity there, that fans and people can interact with the journalists and the sports people, and it's a conversation?
Yeah, it's definitely a conversation, and I think, it's also sometimes a call out,
Sure.
which, can be difficult when you're on the one end of it, certainly. But there's a sort of, it feels to me like there's a certain level of responsibility that maybe people didn't necessarily have before. They weren't having to respond to the very voices that they're leaving out most of the time. And that's much harder to do because you can literally write directly to the person that you have a problem with, or that you think could do a better job or do more with the platform that they have. And for someone like me, I could reach out directly to editors, right? Twitter was really important to my career because I'm not a trained journalist. I sort of fell into this. And having access to people, them being able to see me through my social media first, and seemed to matter in my career. So
yeah, great. So then on the sports media, what do you think they are doing now, and what can they do more of in this shaping social justice and covering cultural issues? Like what's coming up next with that?
Wow. I'm not sure. If you had asked me 2 years ago if we would still be talking about college football and sexual assault, I probably would have said no. Sure. So I'm maybe not the best predictor of these things. I feel like that's still that seems to not be going anywhere.
Keep the conversation going and moving forward.
Yeah, that conversation in particular, which is of course the one I probably know the best,
Sure.
is, coupled with it, just campus sexual assault generally. We're having larger conversations about, violence against women within our society. All those things are like pushing. I think I would hope that moving forward, one of the things that we see, and I don't know how this will affect what actually gets written, but that there's just more diverse voices in
Mm.
sports media. I mean, sports media in particular is a very white male space, even compared to other media that are that too. Sports media skews very strongly in that direction, and I think it would be amazing to imagine sort of the conversations we'd be having if there were more women, if there were more people of color, if there were more women of color, like all these different identities that are left out at this point.
Yeah, that's a great point. And then I wanted to give you the opportunity to talk a little bit about your book as well. So could you just tell us a little bit about what it is and maybe why we would want to read it?
Yeah, why would you want to read it? That's a good. I mean, it's a difficult topic. It was difficult to write. It's about college football and sexual assault, specifically that intersection. It builds on a lot of work that I've been doing over the last 3 years in particular. It's a thematic look, so it looks at stuff like patterns that I found from all the cases that I've seen since 1974. I think that's the earliest one. I look at the way that race and gender intersect with this issue. I look at how the NCAA, the media, how universities respond, how they sort of follow the script that I find very problematic that allows us all to sort of push it to the side and move on. We're actually seeing Tennessee try desperately at this moment to adopt that script and do that work, and it's not really working anymore because we're becoming better at recognizing it and calling it out. So that's about 2/3 of the book. The last third, I try to suggest stuff that could be better, that we could do. This is how we could do a better job. All sorts of things, from teaching consent, from fans not being so terrible about this kind of reporting, to athletic directors and coaches actually having to maybe literally pay a price for moments when their departments are like with Tennessee or even like Baylor or Florida State, when we're seeing this sort of like larger cultural issues, or hiring women. That's a big one. That's maybe the last one in the book. Just what would it mean to have more women in the media and more women in locker rooms?
Yeah, great. It sounds like you offer a lot of solutions there towards the end. So
Right.
That would be a really great reason to read that. So then at the same time, shifting back to your panel, it's kind of hard, and you're in Austin, it's difficult to stand out at South by Southwest. So what can we expect to really, like, if we can boil it down, what are we going to get out of that panel? Like, what am I going to walk away with the knowledge of?
Yeah, I think what the three of us have talked about a little bit is trying to really ask the hard questions, sort of look at why only certain people get to write on certain stuff, who gets to write on what, and how you do that carefully and how you do that correctly, and what happens if you're writing on a social justice issue and you end up reifying the very stereotype that you're trying to take down just by acknowledging that it exists. These sort of hard questions that if you're going to do this work, which more and more people are doing this work, sort of how you face those head on and do a good job with them.
Yeah, great. Well, those are all of the questions I have, so thank you so much.
Yes, of course.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.